Education is like the cursor on this computer screen. Once you obtain it, or once you know it exists, and you know how to use it, you don't necessarily focus on the cursor itself, but more so the things on the screen is what you focus on, yet the cursor is what assists you click things to get to what you need. That's exactly what education is. Once you obtain proper education, you don't necessarily focus on it, but you nonetheless use it to navigate everything that you do, one way or another. It becomes second nature. The majority of the people that use any type of computer devices don't really focus on the cursor itself, but for the most part, they focus on the other items on the screen rather than the cursor itself as they use it, even though the cursor is what they use to navigate. That is exactly how important education is. But it's so subtle that you don't even think about it when you're putting it to use. And most of the issue the majority of us face in today's world is this cursor that allows us to navigate life called education, just as much as this cursor that allows us to navigate these computer screens so swiftly and easily. It has been stripped away, and when it's given to us, it's given to us in a very dumbed down version. And one of the highly influential part of why most of us are basically playing catch up in today's world when it comes to true education, whether that be financial education, spiritual education, education about how the law and government works. Because if one wants to truly be successful, one has to have those three types of education: education of finance, education of spirituality, and education of how government works, beginning with the immediate family members and then the society itself. If those things are not put into consideration in your daily activities, things might not be all that easy. And there was a very small group of people who figured out these very simple algorithms, and they took it into their hands and decided to dictate it upon people. Decided to dictate how it's going to be, when they're going to grant it upon people, and most importantly, what they really truly intend to. Some of you might have came across this in the past, but nonetheless, this plays a huge role as to why the majority of people in today's world are playing catch up and either not being a victim or trying to basically create a better life. There's a publication called Publication of the General Education Board, Occasional Paper Number 1, The Country School of Tomorrow, by Frederick T. Gates. This was one of the most wealthiest men of its time, along with the Deutsches, the Rockefellers, the Rothschild, all of them. They all came together to create the modern education system that we have today. It is no wonder that when we go to a formal education school, they don't really educate us. They don't really pull substance out of us. They don't really cultivate the mind. They don't really plant the proper seed and have it grow. They don't really nurture it. What they do instead is they just hammer certain things in people's minds, and those things that are hammered don't necessarily benefit them functionally in life, beyond being a cattle for someone else. And the worst part is most people have been conditioned to accept that as being okay and alright. If they deem it okay and alright, then it's okay and alright then. But to those who see things a little bit more, the origin of the reason why things just don't feel right when it comes to certain things is its origin, the education board. In this book, there's a very powerful few sentences that really demonstrates the intent of the people that created the modern colonial education system. Most people, when they hear about colonial education system, they think about some Negro Act or something about indigenous people. No. Everyone suffers from the modern education system. It matters not what you look like, who you are, or what you do. Page 7. It basically summarizes the reason why schools basically work for the banking system. Because most schools are basically paid for by the taxes of the area. If the society or the community or the environment where any given school is, if it's really not that socioeconomically upright, then the children suffers. That determines the quality of education they get. So that automatically lets you know that the financial system automatically connects to education itself, and it tells you who the schooling system works for. People pay district and taxations for the city and the district and whatnot, and part of it, when you look at the list of it, it tells you it's for the school district for education. So the people are being taxed for the education of the children around that community. Yet the quality of education is directly corresponds to the amount of tax they pay. Something is off about that. Something is very off about that. Meaning if a certain community has a low GDP, then basically the quality of education the children gets, and by children I'm not speaking of just middle school or high school. This applies to any college around the area. The quality of education they get corresponds. The monetary system and the education system are tied in together. The reason why is part of the intent of those who actually created that education system. Here is one of the publications that clearly demonstrates their intent. In our dream, we have limitless resource, and the people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hand. The present educational conventions fade from our minds, and unhampered by tradition, we will work our own goodwill upon a grateful and responsive rural folks. And these people are clueless. We shall not try to make these people or any of their children into philosophers or men of learning or of science. Our intent is not to do anything that's going to benefit these children. We're not here to make them smart. We're not here to make them innovative. And the way they did that is to tie the economic value of that community with the value of education the children get. It's really that simple. It's a very simple algorithm of how they do this. This is their mission statement. We are not to raise up from among them authors, meaning people who can read and write, orators, people who can articulate themselves, poets, people who can take those abilities of author and orators and make it creative, or men of letters, meaning anyone competent when it comes to pen and paper game. We shall not search for embryo great artists, painters, musicians. We don't want any creativity from them. We don't want them to think outside the box. And we're not going to create them. In the system that we're creating called the education system, by way of the Board of Education, remember the term system concludes that there are different parts working as one. In today's world, the loose term for the education system is called the school district of so and so. And they will usually have some type of board of education. The board of education that initiated all these school districts was the one started by Rockefeller, the Gates family, and the Rothschild family. And this is their intent that was published in the New York's newspaper. And that publication was extracted and put into a book. We shall not search for embryo great artists, painters, musicians, nor will we cherish even the humbler ambition to raise up from among them lawyers, meaning you would not know how the legal system works. Doctors, you would not know how to take care of yourself, mentally or physically. Preachers, you will not have the ability to come together as a community by way of communicating one way or the other, regardless of what the subject matter is. Politicians, meaning now anything that we're doing to homogenize our intent, you will not be able to come together and influence people's mind to move them to do anything. Statesmen, You cannot represent yourself or your own cause, of whom we now have ample supply. We got them. They are in our hands. Remember, they have limitless resource, and the people yield themselves with perfect docility. These people are stupid, is what they're writing here. And as a result of that, added with our resource, we are not going to bring anything good out of them. We will make them slaves. We are to follow the admonition of the good apostle who said, mind not high things, but condescend to men of low degree. They are taking a very pure-hearted phrase, and they are interpreting based on their intent. Meaning, mind not high things. Meaning, these people, we're going to make sure that they do not see life from a high perspective in any way, in any aspect of life. Think of every branch of life and attribute that could exist. They will not see it, but we will make them condescend to lower degree. And generally, with respect to these high things, all that we shall try to do is just to create presently about these country homes an atmosphere and conditions such that if by chance a child of genius should spring up from the soil, that genius will surely bud and not be blighted. We will kill all the possible lights by controlling the socio-economic environment. We will put them in a box so hard and so deep that even the algorithm of reality that naturally creates exception every now and then will not suffice. The nurturing aspect of the environment that genius will be brought into will kill that potential. That is what their plan is. Then goes on to say, putting therefore all high things quite behind us, we turn with a sense of freedom and delight to the simple, lowly, needful things that promise well for rural area. This is the state of mind that they're instilling on the people. And then now be content with less than nothing. Be content with ignorance. Be content with fear, anger, loss, sorrow. Know not much and be fine with it. It's okay to be ignorant. That is a state of mind they will put in the people's mind. Don't know how the financial system works. Don't know how monetary system works. Remain mundane. This is their state of mind and intent when they created the Board of Education, the colonial education system at North America. For the task that we set before ourselves is a very simple as well as a very beautiful one. This is how they look at it. It's a simple thing, and it's beautiful to them. To train these people as we find them for a perfectly ideal life just where they are. They are not going to improve, and we don't want them to improve. That's what they're saying. And we will make them into a working class. Yes, ideal, for we shall allow ourselves to be extravagant, meaning we will be their gods, since we are only dreaming, meaning we will make our thoughts exist in earth as it is in heaven. We will see a dream and an idea, and we will create it. Call it idyllic, if you like, an idyllic life under the skies and within the horizon, however narrow, where they first open their eyes. We will be their gods, so much so that we will create what their physical environment look like. Isn't it a little bit odd to you that you walk around and you see the way these houses, buildings are structured? Has it ever crossed your mind that it's a bit odd that it's structured the way it is? It's all on a weird grid. It's all strict, stiff. No flow of life. When you go to certain areas in other parts of the world, you see the way this building is structured and built. You will walk into it or near it and you will feel the life in it. It's because of the sequence and the ratio of how things are structured, the spacing. Some call it feng shui, some call it Fibonacci sequence. When you structure buildings that way, it affects the thoughts and the feelings of people. It affects the ability for people to function a certain way. That is what's being incorporated into this thing. So much so that they will now put certain consumer mediums so that whenever you make money, you go go ahead and give your money back to us. Don't use it for yourself. Don't use it for your mind. Don't use it for your children. Don't use it for any type of true education. Don't use it to better yourself. Don't invest it in obtaining assets in any way. Just stay low and we'll be your God. That is what they're saying here. We are to try to make that life just where it is. Healthful, intelligent, efficient, to fill it with thoughts and purpose. Meaning what they are going to do, what they are going to consider good or bad, we will create it for them. They will not create their own reality. And guess what? All this is being done through the education system. And with a gracious social culture, not without its joy. Meaning we will condition them so much that they cannot do without it. This is what the majority of people in today's world suffer from. The state of mind is also what people who come into new information that is really normal, but they take the same state of mind and transfer it into new information. If you know anyone with a state of mind that fits this mission statement, I implore you to have a conversation with them. Show this to them. Tell them to shed that state of mind when they're coming into a new information. Education is a tool that's going to be used as a form of navigation, and so much has been done to damage people's minds. An awareness of that damage and the intent that's been preserved in writing and books like this goes a long way. There's a bookshelf reference. The name of the book is by Gates Frederick Taylor, The Country School of Tomorrow. This book talks about the Rockefeller, the Rothschild, Deutsches, and the Gates family, and how they basically initiated the education system. I highly implore you to read this book. As small as it is, just 20 pages. It's quite informative. We, right now, are the future of those children. What we're going through now is already the future aspect of what the children will be going through. And how we go through it and how we do it is what we will hand to them. See, children are not the future. We are. For the children, the adults are the future, because we are a roadmap that they can look at to see what their future will be like if they take certain paths. It's going to be a leftover, something used. And if we don't use it properly, it would harm them. They will suffer for it. We are merely borrowing these times that we have here, and these things that we're doing, and all these land and resources that we're acquiring, if you're into stuff like that, from our children and those who will come behind us. All the things we're doing, even now, at this moment, as I speak and as you listen, this activity is being borrowed for the sake of those who will be coming behind us. Because truly it's theirs. These things are not just being done just for us alone. It's been done for someone else, so that they can improve upon it and become better. Take care. Best of luck.